Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And I'm pretty excited about this one because this knife is one that I actually can't find any other videos about. And it's also part of a collection of knives that I actually really like, the Schrade 300 series. There's the 301, 302, 303, 304, and they're like 301 and 302 are similar, 303, 304 are similar. Then there's the 307, 308, and they're similar. This is the 306, so it fits in between. Now, I've not seen anything about a 305. Maybe it's not released yet. Maybe it'll be for 2015, or maybe it's just going to come out later on. Whatever the case, this is a fairly recent addition to the Schrade 300 series of knives. All of them are these heavy-duty, full steel frame lock knives. They're all carbonitride titanium coated, and all of them are frame locks. Now, this one has a couple of things that are different. I'll try to point that out. And there are a couple of things that are the same. Well, the things I just listed are all the same. This one, in particular, has a very different handles on it. They made the handle much more ergonomic on this particular model. They've made the blade have a slight bend to it with a swedge on top. That's a little bit different. I think the 301 might have a swedged blade as well. There's a little smaller in dimensions on this knife in terms of the handle size, the blade, not the length, but the width of the blade. This is a little narrower, more like the 307. And what else do you need to know that's different about it? I don't know. That's probably it. The rest of the things we'll notice as we kind of go along through the review. Very cool knife. And all the knives in this series are heavy duty. They're strong knives. They're a big hunk of steel. They're all pretty thick construction, you know, thick blade steel, thick handle material. Everything is kind of overbuilt on all of these knives, and this one is certainly no exception. So with that said, it comes in at 8 ounces, which is a heavy knife, especially for the size. This knife is 8 1/4 inches long. Now, I have knives that are over 9 inches that don't come anywhere near 8 ounces, that are more like 5 ounces or 6 ounces. You know, one of my biggest knives is my M21 from CRKT, and it only weighs 6 ounces. This thing is a full inch shorter and outweighs it by almost double. Not quite, but almost. So this is, I guess not, by a full 2 ounces. I'm exaggerating a little bit there. But you know, my Cold Steel Recon 1 is huge compared to this, and it only weighs in at 5 ounces. So that should give you an idea of what kind of weight you're dealing with. In this size range, I feel it's totally reasonable to expect around a 4-ounce knife. So this is really double the weight that you think of finding in a blade of this size. So that weight is totally understandable. I'm just going to slow down and let you really look at this knife. It is a hollow grind. I haven't talked about the blade yet, but I'll get to that. But you can see everything is heavy duty. Everything is solid steel. And so, you know, you kind of just look at it and go, well, no wonder it weighs 8 ounces. Look at the steel in that thing. And so, although we could complain about the weight, if you kind of look at the knife, you go, well, that weight is not unexpected. If you made this lighter, you could make it lighter just by making all the pieces thinner. Then you wouldn't have the same essence. This knife would lose something, I feel, if you thinned down all of the components and tried to save weight in that way. So let's get into the specs on the knife. It is, as I already said, 8 1/4 inches long. The blade is 3 1/2 inches. The weight is 8 ounces, and the handle thickness is 7/16 of an inch. For those of you not, familiar with feet and inches, it's, 1.5 cm, or if you're just more like rounder numbers, it's just under 1/2 inch. Okay, 8/16 would be a 1/2 inch, so this is just under 1/2 inch thick. Which is not too bad to carry in your pocket for size. It's just the weight, especially this time of year where you're wearing shorts or thinner pants. You're going to notice this thing big time if you carry it in your pocket. And I've been carrying it for a few days. And by the way, I don't hate it. It's not that I'm like, oh, this is way too heavy. It's so uncomfortable. Especially if you're wearing jeans or pants that are just a little bit tighter, that are able to hold that weight close to you, it's not that bad. I would suggest that if you wore lighter or looser pants, you'd really notice that this knife was in your pocket. Now, some of the more detailed specifications, we'll start with the blade. It is a flipper design. So you can see there's the flipping mechanism sticking out the back there. It works with a little bit of wrist action. That was my poor deployment. Normally that doesn't happen. It does work. It could work a little better, and it will once I take this knife apart and clean up the pivot and all the washers and give it a good coat of Hops 9. The blade itself is, of course, a Tanto blade. You can see the swedge there on the top and how it kind of comes down to meet that point. So it's kind of a different blade shape than what they've done with the other models in this series. It is 9CR18 MOV steel, which is decent. It holds an edge pretty well. You know, it doesn't hold an edge quite as good as AUS 8. Maybe holds it a little better than 8CR13 MOV. You know, and let's be honest, between those two steels, AUS 8 and 8CR13, there's not a huge degree of difference anyway. So if it falls in between those two, or even if it's closer to 8CR13 MOV, you kind of know what you're dealing with. It's going to hold an edge reasonably well, but you're going to have to sharpen it. And when you do sharpen it, it's not going to be that difficult. It's a hollow grind, which is nice, although this blade is still very thick. So you're going to get a lot of wedge action. That is, you're going to be pushing the material apart with the body of the blade as much as you're cutting it with the sharpened edge, okay? So you're going to have to be aware of that, especially if you're cutting something like cardboard or a piece of fruit. The knife is going to push that material apart as much as it cuts through it. So that's probably something you may want to think about depending on how you plan to use this knife. There are thumb studs as well as the flipper, and they both work. There's also very good jimping on this knife. So that kind of gives you the ins and outs of the blade. It is a very functional blade. As I've said before, every time I talk about Tanto style blades, they're exceptionally functional. And, you know, people look at them and think, oh, that's tactical. It ought to be for soldiers. And, you know, really, that's not so much true. A knife with a good belly on it is probably better for slashing and knife fighting. A Tanto style blade, yes, is good for penetrating straight into something, especially body armor. I know that gets tossed around a lot. But that secondary tip with the straight edge, another straight edge here, all of those portions of the blade can be used very specifically for utility cutting tasks. And actually, I'm going to suggest outperform a typical or more normal blade shape with a round belly on the front in some of those applications. So I feel like a Tanto blade is very utilitarian, even though it sometimes gets that tactical reputation. So that's the blade. How about the handle? The handle is all steel as well. It's a frame lock, single position pocket clip. I already mentioned it's 7/16 of an inch thick. The deployment is so-so on it. As I said, I've got to take it apart and oil it, and that'll make a big difference. The handle is very ergonomic, much more so than some of the other models in this series. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned, it weighs about the same as the 307, 308, but when I held them both side by side, this one felt lighter even though it isn't, primarily because of the handle shape. It's just more comfortable in hand. And so because of that, it feels like you're not carrying a knife that's quite as bulky. The lanyard hole is definitely a good size for 550 cord, although if you're carrying this in your pocket, I know I said you probably don't want to carry it in your pocket, but let's imagine you are. Your lanyard now is in the bottom of your pocket. If you put this in a toolbox or a fishing tackle box in your truck or car, whatever, and you want to make sure you can get a hold of it quickly and easily, sure, a bright orange lanyard on here, a bright yellow or something would be completely legitimate, and it would work very, very well. It is pillar construction, so you can see the two pillars there at the back and then the pivot screw at the front with the stop pin there. There we go. I'll open it up so you can see through. And so that basically gives you the ins and outs. Oh, the coating is like all of these knives, carbonitride titanium coating. and it's pretty good, but I'll see if I can get in close enough here to show you. You can kind of start to see it there now. There you go. See how there's some places where the coating is just a little spotty? It came new like that. So that's not ideal, but you know, when you buy a knife that costs $20, you expect there's the potential for some quality control issues. And so it's not the end of the world. And certainly if I back the knife off this far, you can not notice it. And I can tell you, sitting here in person looking at the knife, I can't see it from 3 feet away, but I can see it from a few inches away. So just to kind of give you a heads up on that, this one is missing a little bit of the coating. Overall, this is a really good knife. It's performed very well for me. It does need to be taken apart and oiled. You can see that now. It's performed really well, very comfortable even for pretty hard cutting tasks. You could use this as a pocket knife to carry with you every day, although I'm going to suggest it's just a little heavy for that application. I would be inclined to put it, for me it's going to go in my display case, but if you wanted to carry this with you every day, and I have used the other one as a car knife, stick it in the glove box, stick it in my backpack, stick it in something that I don't have to feel that weight in my pocket all the time. Perfect application for any of those tasks. As I've said about all of these knives, I feel like any one of them from the 300 series would be a great tool belt knife. When I worked in construction, I always, in addition to my utility knife, which was always an Olfa knife, I would always carry a folding knife in my tool belt and was thankful for it many, many times. And I think this is a perfect knife for that kind of a role if you ever do that kind of thing. You could also push this into, you know, bushcraft type of tasks because it's fairly heavily built. Certainly I carved up some wood with it, and you can do that no problem. And you could probably even do some light chopping with this knife, although that's never recommended with a folding knife. So that's my take on the Schrade SCH 306. Pretty cool knife, just a little heavy for everyday carry, but in virtually any other capacity, it's going to excel. As I said, you may even use it as an everyday carry knife if you really, really like it that much and therefore are willing to put up with that extra weight. There you go. Talk to you later.